Hello, Team 1, Team 2, and Team 3. This is Curtis in the Framework group, and welcome to another Framecast. Today I'm going to show you how to use filters. Yes, in version 2.17 of Voozanoo, we now have filters. So here you see a nice listing in front of me, and I can select my listings, of course, but now I can select filters, and those are all the filters I've created. What I'll do is I'll show you a few filters, how to use them, and then we'll go back and we'll actually create a few filters. So let's start with the basic boring filter. I call it the uh, boring filter because it's a really static filter. Here we go. I selected it and I said the date of birth is less than 2000, January 1st, 2000, and it's masculine. That's all it does. It's static. Of course, that's not really fun. So let's go and look at one where I can actually change those dynamically. So let's go to a less boring filter. Here we go. So now I can say, okay, what do I want? Feminine. Okay, I want to filter for feminine, and I click over here on research, and it shows me, it filters for me, as you can see. All right, poids supérieur à. Well, let's lower that to 50 and see what we get for women. And we get a few more people in there. Okay, nothing really exciting, nothing different that you haven't already seen. Also, what filters will you see here? Only filters that are logically applicable. If you make a filter and it's soliciting tables that are not in this listing here, over here, well then it won't show. So depending on what listing I choose, for example, let me choose my motorcycle one, and here I have all the motorcycles, but yet I don't have much of a choice of filters because the var sets that it's soliciting have nothing to do with the var set of the motorbike. So let's go back to the patient here. Also remember that the filters that you see here are going to be the filters also that are created by people in the groups, in your group and the groups below. So if you have groupings, you may see, or other people may see, many filters that they did not create themselves. And let's look at another filter. Let's look at something with something very cool. Very, very cool is approximations. Now this we didn't have in Voozanoo 3, and this is great. Check this out. So I can say the date of birth is January 1st, 2000, but give or take 10 years, you see? And the weight is 75 kilos plus or minus 20%. So this is really nice. Of course, I've only got one record here, but if I change that, maybe plus or minus 20 years, I should get a few more. Oh, there we go. A lot more people in there. And if I say, well, the weight is going to be the heavy weights, and I'll say plus or minus 5%, and I'll get a different set. So there we go. Is that cool or what? All right, let's look now at one more filter, and then we'll go and create some. We're going to look at the filter with Ands and Ors. Now this is very interesting because I've used Ands and Ors in this filter, and you cannot see that. So keep in mind, when you create filters with ands and ors, it's probably a good idea in the filter name to say what you're anding and oring, because in fact, if I remember correctly, I have sex and date and this or this. Okay, so we have that, and there's absolutely nothing here. So let's see if I can. But it's mostly, I think I've just got a lot of men in this. Always have to click rechercher. And there you go. So that's it for showing you. Now let's actually go and create some. Here's the URL in your Voozanoo 4 application that you're going to want to go to. And this is what it looks like. It's blank. So let me do a basic filter here. I'll say age and sex. VST. So I've got a patient and visit. So this is exactly like making a listing, except for I'm making a filter. And with my patient, I've got his date of birth and sex. Where is sex? Sex. Everybody's looking for sex. Where is it? There we go. So here we go. I have my two variables here. Let me close that so you can see it better. I have date of birth and sex, and now depending on what the variable type is will depend on how I can compare it. So I will say superior to um, a saisie à l'utilisation. Of course, that's much more interesting than the basic static one, and you're probably going to use that all of the time. But now this, which used to be the static value, is actually going to be the default value. What we'll say is 01, 01, 2000 as our default value. Of course, we can change that as needed. And the patient sex we'll say is equal to, we'll allow ourselves to choose that. And we'll start with féminin. And there you go. We have our filter. And we'll now choose age and sex. Okay, it's that easy, huh? Feminine, masculine. Very easy stuff. So let me go back. What I want you to notice here now is that each each variable type does give its own sort of comparison. So let me just grab a Boolean type. So here we go. We have a Boolean type here, and when we put it down below, fumeur égale à différent de. So we have different options, of course, than if it's a date. Or let's look at another variable type, prénom. Yeah, what kind of options will this give us? Notice that it gives us the options of equal to, different than, contains, begins with. What's nice then is that what we can do is we can take begins with and make that saisie à l'utilisation, and that will allow us to search for text. We'll get rid of that and get rid of that, and we can even get rid of that. Search by name. So let me now take that search by name filter, put it up, and that's great. Prénom commence par, voilà, I should find myself if I do see you. Voilà. Let's see if Regis is in here. No. Anybody that begins with a B. There we go. Ben and Barak and Boris. There we go. So there you go. It's really pretty easy to make these different filters. Let me show you now the Deco Variables. Here's one here that I'd like to show you. Is the question was, how are you doing? And we have I'll say saisie à l'utilisation, of course, much more interesting. And those are my dictionary values. So I'll start with neutre, and I will say equal to, different than, and vide. So I can always check for if it's empty. And it's what you expect. It's very simple. Filter for well-being. Let's go take a look at that, and we'll see that we have filter for well-being, and I have my options right there. Ah, notice that. Yes, very good. I'm glad that came up. You'll see here archived values. I'm going to make another framework podcast, Framecast, where I'll explain about archived variables, but you can see them and use them, or you can just use the regular variables. Here we go. Because what happens is you can actually change your dictionary and you can archive the old values, and maybe you would actually like to do a filter on the old values. But right now we'll just do regular filter, and we'll see how many people are doing well. And there you go. Curtis, Pierre, and James the second are doing well. All right, now let's look at something that's kind of interesting, and that is the variables that are dictionary variables, but they are case à cocher, checkbox variables. Let me get rid of this one, and I'm going to choose symptoms. So now here we have all these symptoms, and what you would say is equal to, and we'll make it dynamic. The results there, I'm just going to click on your nose is running. So what this means is if I click on this one item, it means equal to actually means at least one of these is checked. So let's go use it, and we'll see exactly how that works. Go here. And now I can notice it's not there. Of course it's not there, but if I go to show nothing, no filter at all, I can now go back and see my symptoms filter that I want. So notice here my default condition was ne qui coule, and all of these have at least ne qui coule. So notice this person, Ben, down here. If I choose this one, also mot de gorge, Ben should still be there, right? If I look down here, yeah, Ben is still here because he's got ne qui coule. But if he's also got a mot de gorge on another visit, because those are two different visits. If I click, let's say, courbature and get rid of those, then we'll see all the people who had at least courbature. And of course, Ben is not there. All right, so just know that when you do this, it means that there must be at least one of those. So if I click many of them, I'll probably get everybody. It doesn't mean it has to be exactly this. What it means that the record has at least one of those checked. So you see I've got many there. I've even got a second line. Okay. If you choose is different than, it's actually a strange sort of an idea, but what it means is different than exactly this. So if I have those two checked, this means I'll filter only the things that are exactly the opposite of check, no check, check, no check, no check, no check, no check. It's a strange idea, so I don't think you're really going to be using it. Let's go on to the final item, which is the most interesting, which is using ands and ors. Notice you saw this up here. Typically, all our filters are anded together. We want the age and the sex and that, but there are some times when you're going to want to use the or condition. So let's create a filter that says they've got to be male or female, and either their IMC is greater than a certain value or their weight is greater than a certain value. So let's start first with the person's sex. Okay, we're going to have now for each of their visits, we want to look at their EMC and their weight. Okay, so we said we want sex and this or this value. So what we do is we click on, instead of déplacer, instead of moving them, because I can just move these up and down now, that's what happens. Let me move them back. If I want, I can click on this, and now I can fusion them. So now they'll make a group, and these are the two that I want it to be in an OR group. So I'm going to just take this guy, and bink, he goes in there, and it's a group. Now it's an AND group, so I'm just going to click that to OR. Now we have what we want. We have sex and the IMC, or the weight is of a certain value. And I'll just do superior then, dynamic selection. I'll give a default value, the IMC greater than 25, and the weight greater than, let's say, 70. And we'll start with equal to the value of masculin. So there we go. So that's how you use it. You make groups. I can go back to déplacer, and I can actually, if I wanted to do an OR among all three of these, I could actually pull this in here and make it part of the OR group. So it would be IMC or sex or weight, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm going to go back there. All right, let's save this one, and this time. And now I'll select Ands and Ors. And here we go. We have men who have either IMC over 25 or their weight is over 70. And I'm going to see what happens if we have any people over 30 IMC, if that adds to it. I got a different set of people. Or if their weight, let's say their weight is greater than 100. I mean, they're really heavy here. All right, so there you go. I see my IMC and I see my weight there. I can check the same thing for the women. Again, this one is sex and IMC or weight. So you don't see it here. It doesn't say and maybe that's something we'll add at a future point. But probably a good idea to put in the name what you're anding and oring, especially if you're using ors. Ands are pretty much implied and understood. Okay, now I'd like to show you how to make the approximations, and that's very cool. So let's go back here, add date of birth, and we'll add the weight. Now what we do is we click on this little guy here, and you see this? Check this out, approximation. So for this variable, we're on weight. And I'm going to say approximately, I want to filter for approximately plus or minus 20 kilos. And I would say I wouldn't put anything there. So that would be plus or minus 20 kilos. If I wanted to, I could even make that one dynamic. So I could actually say, okay, maybe 10 kilos, maybe 30 kilos. Or if I wanted to, I could just say in percentage as well. Plus or minus 20%. So I'll do that. I can start out with a weight of equal to 75 again. And I'll start out with a date of birth equal to 01/01/2000. And again, here, approximations on a date. So I can approximate the date. And here I can actually use one-sided approximations too, but which in the end logically turns out to mean superior than. So it's more likely you'll use plus and minus. Again, here for a date, I can say, well, let's say 5 years. All right. So I can say 5 months, 5 days. And again, I can use an approximation. Now for date, you notice here also we have the function right now. So I can use that if I want, but I don't. Let's select now the approximation on weight. And here we go. You see date of birth is the year 2000 plus or minus 5 years. And the weight is 75 plus or minus 20%. And if we look, maybe see we'll do 50% of that. We should get a few more people. Indeed we do. And if the date of birth goes up another 15 years, that gives us 30 years in total. Well, not that many more people. But you get the idea. So I can say 50 plus or minus, let's say 100%. That'll give us a lot of people. But they weren't born the right time. I've got some oldies in here. Yeah, we see people born 1961. Don't forget, you can always use that. 1961, 1998, and 2027. So there you go. There you have it. Approximations, very cool new feature. And you just use that little button down here, and you'll see your approximations and set them up. Thank you for listening to this Framecast. I know it was a little bit long, but the filters are really important and extremely useful. See you next time.